December 6, 1944, Farm Hall Detention Center, England. The metal chair scraped against the wooden floor as Professor Werner Heisenberg leaned back, dismissing reports of American atomic research with the condescending laughter that had characterized German scientific attitudes since 1933. The Americans lack the theoretical foundation for such work, he told his fellow captured physicists, unaware that British intelligence was recording every word through hidden microphones embedded in the Victorian Manor's walls. They are plumbers and engineers, not scientists. Even with our Jewish refugees, they cannot achieve what requires true understanding of quantum mechanics and nuclear physics. Outside, December snow fell on the English countryside, while across the Atlantic, American scientists at Los Alamos prepared final calculations for a weapon that would render German physics irrelevant within 8 months. What Heisenberg and his colleagues didn't know was that their dismissive conversations were being preserved for posterity, capturing the moment when the world's most arrogant scientific establishment learned they had been intellectually surpassed by the very minds they had systematically dismissed as racially and culturally inferior. The Farm Hall detention facility housed 10 of Germany's most prominent atomic physicists, captured during the final collapse of the Third Reich and brought to England for interrogation about German nuclear research capabilities. Among them sat the intellectual elite of Nazi science, Werner Heisenberg, Nobel Prize winner and theoretical physicist who had led German atomic research, Otto Hahn, discoverer of nuclear fission, Max von Laue, X-ray crystallography pioneer, and Carl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, theoretical physicist and philosopher who had provided mathematical foundations for German nuclear weapons research. These men represented the pinnacle of German scientific achievement, yet their conversations revealed an intellectual arrogance that had blinded them to the greatest scientific breakthrough in human history, occurring simultaneously in American laboratories they dismissed as intellectually primitive. The psychological foundation of German scientific contempt rested on decades of academic tradition that equated theoretical sophistication with practical impossibility. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, von Laue's crystal structure research, and Hahn's nuclear chemistry discoveries had established German physics as the world's theoretical leader, creating intellectual pride that assumed theoretical knowledge automatically translated to practical superiority. This academic arrogance was reinforced by Nazi ideology that proclaimed German physics as racially superior to Jewish physics, a propaganda distinction that encouraged German scientists to dismiss American research as contaminated by inferior minds, incapable of true scientific understanding. The recordings captured at Farm Hall revealed the depth of German miscalculation about American scientific capabilities. Professor Carl von Weizsäcker, discussing intercepted reports of American atomic research, laughed openly at suggestions that American scientists are approaching nuclear weapons development. American physics is application without understanding, von Weizsäcker told his colleagues on December 8, 1944. They have excellent engineers and adequate laboratories, but they lack the theoretical foundation necessary for nuclear weapons. Fermi and Einstein are competent, but they are isolated individuals working within a system that values practical results over fundamental understanding. Nuclear weapons require theoretical mastery that American education simply cannot provide. The contempt expressed by German scientists reflected systematic underestimation of American research infrastructure and collaborative methodology that had been developing since the 1930s. While German physics operated through traditional academic hierarchies that emphasized individual theoretical achievement, American research had evolved collaborative approaches that integrated theoretical physics with industrial engineering, university research with corporate manufacturing, and academic theory with practical application. This methodological difference, dismissed by German scientists as intellectual primitivism, actually represented scientific evolution beyond traditional European academic models. Dr. Otto Hahn, whose 1938 discovery of nuclear fission had initiated global atomic research, expressed particular disdain for American practical approaches to nuclear physics. Fission requires understanding of nuclear structure that Americans cannot achieve through their industrial methods, Hahn stated during a recorded conversation on December 12, 1944. They approach physics like manufacturing automobiles, systematic but without theoretical depth. Nuclear weapons demand mathematical sophistication that their practical education system cannot produce. They may achieve nuclear reactors for power generation, but weapons require precision that industrial methods cannot accomplish. The German Uranium Club, led by Heisenberg throughout the war, had operated under assumptions of scientific superiority that prevented accurate assessment of Allied atomic research capabilities. German atomic research had focused on theoretical calculations and small-scale laboratory experiments, while American scientists were constructing industrial facilities capable of processing uranium and plutonium on unprecedented scales. The conceptual gap was fundamental. German scientists conceived atomic research as academic investigation, while Americans approached it as industrial engineering problem requiring massive resource coordination and systematic technological development. Professor Max von Laue, whose X-ray crystallography work had earned him a Nobel Prize, provided the most detailed critique of American scientific methodology during recorded discussions throughout December 1944. American science lacks philosophical foundation, von Laue explained to his fellow prisoners. They treat physics as applied mathematics, rather than fundamental investigation of natural reality. Nuclear weapons require understanding of matter's basic structure that cannot be achieved through their pragmatic approach. They may create crude devices through trial and error, but sophisticated nuclear weapons demand theoretical insight that American materialism prevents. The recordings revealed German scientists' complete failure to understand that American atomic research operated on industrial scales that transcended traditional laboratory methodology entirely. While German atomic research remained confined to university facilities with limited resources and academic personnel, American scientists had mobilized industrial infrastructure, including entire cities dedicated to uranium processing, plutonium production, and weapons assembly. The conceptual framework was incompatible. German scientists thought in terms of laboratory experiments, while Americans had created industrial processes that treated atomic weapons as manufacturing problems requiring systematic engineering solutions. The psychological impact of this intellectual arrogance was documented through British intelligence recordings that captured German scientists' genuine shock when presented with evidence of American atomic progress. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Perrin, British scientific intelligence officer responsible for farm hall monitoring, reported increasing German agitation as intercepted communication suggested American atomic research exceeded German theoretical expectations. Heisenberg's private conversations revealed desperate attempts to rationalize American achievement as impossible or exaggerated, intellectual denial that prevented accurate assessment of Allied capabilities until mathematical proof became unavoidable. Christmas 1944 brought the most comprehensive demonstration of German scientific misconception when farm hall prisoners received sanitized reports of American industrial mobilization for atomic weapons production. The scale of American commitment, entire cities constructed for uranium enrichment, industrial facilities employing tens of thousands of workers, university research coordinated with corporate manufacturing, exceeded German comprehension of what atomic research required. Dr. von Weizsäcker's analysis, recorded on December 24, dismissed American industrial mobilization as wasteful application of resources to problems that require theoretical solution rather than brute force engineering. The New Year 1945 conversations revealed German physicists' growing anxiety, as evidence accumulated suggesting American atomic research had achieved practical breakthrough beyond German theoretical calculations. Professor Heisenberg's discussions with Dr. Hahn showed increasing concern that American industrial methods might actually produce nuclear weapons before German scientific approaches could complete theoretical development. Yet even this growing worry was expressed through intellectual contempt that assumed American success would represent crude engineering rather than sophisticated physics understanding. The final pre-war scientific assessment captured at Farm Hall came through Dr. von Weizsäcker's comprehensive analysis delivered to his fellow prisoners on March 15, 1945. The Americans may achieve nuclear explosion through industrial trial and error, von Weizsäcker concluded, but they cannot create sophisticated weapons without theoretical understanding that their educational system cannot provide. Any American nuclear device will be primitive, unreliable, and strategically useless compared to weapons that require German theoretical precision. They are building larger laboratories while we develop deeper understanding. Science will triumph over engineering when nuclear weapons become reality. The transformation was approaching rapidly. German physicists who had dismissed American atomic research as theoretically impossible would soon confront mathematical proof that democratic scientific collaboration collaboration, had achieved what Germanic intellectual superiority never accomplished. They had maintained contempt for American plumbers and engineers, while those same practical minds prepared to demonstrate ultimate mastery of the universe's fundamental forces through weapons that would reshape human history and render German scientific arrogance forever obsolete. The recordings preserved at Farm Hall captured the final months of German scientific confidence before reality would shatter every assumption about intellectual superiority, theoretical sophistication, and racial determinism in scientific achievement. The greatest physics minds of the Third Reich would soon learn that their dismissive laughter had echoed through laboratories where their supposed inferiors were preparing to unlock the power of the atom itself. By January 1945, while German physicists at Farm Hall continued their dismissive conversations about American scientific inferiority, the Manhattan Project had achieved industrial mobilization that exceeded German atomic research by factors that transcended comparison entirely. At Los Alamos, New Mexico, American scientists led by J. Robert Oppenheimer operated research facilities that consumed more electricity daily than the entire German atomic program had used throughout the war. The laboratory complex sprawled across 54,000 acres with 6,000 researchers, technicians, and support personnel working in conditions that surpassed German university standards while focusing exclusively on nuclear weapons development that German scientists still considered theoretically impossible through industrial methods. The scale of American scientific commitment challenged every assumption underlying German intellectual contempt. While Heisenberg's uranium club operated with approximately 70 researchers scattered across German universities with limited funding and primitive equipment, the Manhattan Project employed over 130,000 personnel across multiple states with unlimited government funding and industrial resources exceeding Germany's total wartime scientific budget. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, alone employed 75,000 workers in uranium enrichment facilities that covered 59,000 acres, representing scientific infrastructure that German physicists couldn't conceptualize within their academic framework of individual theoretical research. Dr. J. Robert Oppenheimer, dismissed by German scientists as a competent administrator, lacking theoretical depth, coordinated research that integrated quantum mechanics, nuclear engineering, metallurgy, explosive technology, and precision manufacturing in ways that transcended traditional academic boundaries. His team included Enrico Fermi, whose reactor design surpassed German nuclear engineering, Edward Teller, whose theoretical calculations exceeded Heisenberg's mathematical models, and Hans Bethe, whose nuclear fusion research operated beyond German theoretical comprehension. These inferior minds, many of them Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi persecution, had created collaborative research methods that produced practical nuclear weapons while German scientists remained trapped in academic isolation. The Los Alamos Theoretical Division, led by Hans Bethe, had solved nuclear weapons design problems that German physicists considered impossible through mathematical approaches they dismissed as engineering rather than physics. Bethe's team calculated critical mass requirements, implosion dynamics, and fusion reactions with precision that exceeded German theoretical accuracy while simultaneously developing practical delivery systems, safety mechanisms, and production methods. This integration of theoretical sophistication with practical application represented scientific methodology evolution beyond traditional European academic models that emphasized individual theoretical achievement over collaborative problem-solving. The industrial infrastructure supporting Manhattan Project research operated on scales that German scientists couldn't comprehend within their framework of university-based atomic investigation. The Oak Ridge gaseous diffusion plant, designed for uranium-235 separation, consumed 4% of American electricity production while processing uranium quantities that exceeded German atomic material accumulation by factors of thousands. The facility's K-25 building alone covered 44 acres with equipment more sophisticated than anything in German scientific institutions, representing industrial science that treated nuclear materials processing as routine manufacturing rather than laboratory experimentation. At Hanford, Washington, American engineers had constructed plutonium production reactors that operated continuously to create weapons-grade fissile material through industrial processes that German atomic research never attempted. The Hanford site employed 51,000 workers in facilities covering 586 square miles, creating plutonium quantities sufficient for multiple nuclear weapons while German scientists remained focused on theoretical calculations about potential nuclear chain reactions. This represented fundamental difference in scientific approach. American Americans treated nuclear weapons as industrial engineering challenges requiring systematic resource application, while Germans conceived atomic research as academic investigation requiring individual theoretical brilliance. The psychological impact of this methodological difference was documented through intercepted German scientific communications that revealed growing concern about American brute force approaches to nuclear physics achieving practical results beyond German theoretical expectations. Professor Heisenberg's correspondence with German university colleagues, monitored by Allied intelligence, showed increasing anxiety that American industrial methods might actually produce nuclear weapons before German theoretical research completed fundamental calculations. Yet even this growing worry was expressed through intellectual contempt that assumed American success would represent crude engineering rather than sophisticated scientific understanding. Dr. Leo Szilard, Hungarian refugee physicist working at the University of Chicago's metallurgical laboratory, had developed chain reaction theories that surpassed German nuclear physics while simultaneously designing practical reactor systems for plutonium production. Szillard's collaborative work with Enrico Fermi had achieved controlled nuclear fission in December 1942, demonstrating mastery of nuclear chain reactions that German scientists still considered theoretically problematic. This achievement represented not just scientific breakthrough but intellectual proof that refugee scientists fleeing Nazi persecution possessed theoretical sophistication exceeding their former German colleagues. The Trinity test preparations throughout early 1945 represented scientific coordination that transcended German comprehension of what atomic research required. American scientists had designed, manufactured, and prepared to detonate a plutonium implosion device, while German physicists remained uncertain about basic nuclear chain reaction feasibility. The test device incorporated precision engineering, explosive technology, and nuclear physics integration that demonstrated theoretical understanding combined with practical capability beyond anything German atomic research had achieved or attempted. The refugee scientist contribution provided the most devastating refutation of Nazi racial theories about scientific capability. Albert Einstein, dismissed by German scientists as Jewish physicist lacking Germanic theoretical depth, had provided theoretical foundation for nuclear weapons through his mass-energy equivalence equation, E=mc. Enrico Fermi, whose wife was Jewish and who had fled fascist Italy, achieved controlled nuclear fission that enabled weapons-grade plutonium production. Edward Teller, Hungarian Jewish refugee, developed hydrogen fusion theories that exceeded German nuclear physics understanding. These racially inferior minds had created nuclear weapons capability, while Germanic intellectual superiority remained trapped in academic theoretical discussions. The technical documentation from Los Alamos revealed American understanding of nuclear physics that surpassed German theoretical calculations in every significant category. Plutonium implosion designs required mathematical precision and engineering coordination that German scientists hadn't attempted because they considered such practical application beyond theoretical physics scope. The American approach integrated university research with industrial manufacturing, academic theory with corporate engineering, and individual brilliance with systematic collaboration in ways that transcended traditional German academic models based on hierarchical authority and individual achievement. Spring 1945 brought final preparation phases that demonstrated American scientific achievement operating beyond German theoretical comprehension entirely. The Trinity test device assembled at Los Alamos using plutonium produced at Hanford and enriched uranium from Oak Ridge represented integration of nuclear physics, precision engineering, and industrial manufacturing that German atomic research never approached. American scientists had solved nuclear weapons design, production, and delivery challenges while German physicists remained focused on theoretical discussions about whether nuclear chain reactions were practically achievable. The mathematical reality was overwhelming and undeniable. American nuclear weapons research operated with funding exceeding $2 billion, personnel numbering 130,000, and industrial facilities covering hundreds of thousands of acres, while German atomic research struggled with limited university budgets, scattered personnel, and primitive laboratory equipment. The resource disparity transcended comparison. American atomic research consumed more electricity monthly than German atomic research had used throughout the entire war, while producing weapons-grade nuclear materials in quantities that German scientists couldn't obtain for basic experimentation. But the most psychologically devastating aspect of American achievement was the revelation that democratic scientific
scientific collaboration had surpassed authoritarian academic hierarchy through methodological superiority rather than resource advantage alone. Jewish refugee scientists fleeing Nazi persecution had created theoretical foundations for nuclear weapons that exceeded Germanic intellectual achievement while simultaneously developing practical applications that German academic isolation prevented. The combination of theoretical sophistication with collaborative methodology had produced scientific capabilities that individual brilliance within hierarchical systems couldn't achieve. The transformation was nearly complete. German physicists who had dismissed American atomic research as theoretically impossible were about to confront mathematical proof that democratic scientific cooperation had achieved nuclear weapons through superior understanding combined with industrial capability that made German atomic research appear primitive by comparison. The intellectual arrogance that had prevented recognition of American scientific achievement would soon collapse under evidence that inferior minds had mastered the fundamental forces of the universe while Germanic superiority remained trapped in academic theoretical discussions about whether such mastery was even possible.
August 6, 1945, 3:47 p.m. local time. Farm Hall Detention Center, England. The BBC radio announcement crackled through the Victorian Manor's drawing room, where 10 German physicists sat in stunned silence, their world of intellectual superiority collapsing with each word. President Truman has announced that American forces have dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The weapon, described as harnessing the basic power of the universe, has destroyed the entire city center. Professor Werner Heisenberg's hands trembled as he reached to turn up the radio volume, his face draining of color as the reality penetrated his consciousness. For 18 months he had dismissed American atomic research as theoretically impossible, laughing at reports of Allied nuclear weapons development. Now British microphones hidden throughout the facility captured the moment when German scientific arrogance confronted mathematical proof of its complete intellectual failure. The immediate reaction among the German physicists was psychological denial that revealed the depth of their miscalculation about American scientific capabilities. Otto Hahn, discoverer of nuclear fission, immediately declared the radio report impossible propaganda designed to accelerate Japanese surrender. No nation could achieve nuclear weapons through industrial methods, Hahn insisted to his fellow prisoners, his voice recorded for posterity by British intelligence. The Americans lack theoretical foundation for such work. This must be conventional explosive combined with radioactive material to simulate atomic weapon effects. True nuclear weapons require understanding that their practical education system cannot provide. But Professor Carl von Weizsäcker's attempted mathematical analysis of the radio report revealed growing recognition that American achievement transcended German theoretical calculations entirely. Von Weizsäcker began calculating energy requirements for citywide destruction, comparing theoretical nuclear yields with conventional explosive capabilities, attempting to prove American claims were physically impossible. His calculations, documented through farm hall recordings, showed increasing agitation as mathematical evidence supported rather than refuted American atomic weapon claims. If this report is accurate, von Weizsäcker told his colleagues that evening, then our fundamental assumptions about nuclear weapons feasibility have been completely wrong. The psychological breaking point came when additional BBC reports throughout August 6 provided technical details about American atomic weapons that confirmed German scientists' worst fears about their intellectual inadequacy. The uranium-235 weapon dropped on Hiroshima incorporated isotope separation techniques that German atomic research had never attempted due to theoretical complexity and industrial requirements beyond German capability. The reported explosive yield in Aryan 20,000 tons of TNT from nuclear material weighing less than 100 pounds represented energy release that German calculations had suggested was impossible through any practical nuclear weapon design. Dr. Max von Laue's response to the Hiroshima announcement provided the most psychologically devastating acknowledgement of German scientific failure captured in the farm hall recordings. "We have been surpassed by minds we considered inferior," von Laue admitted during evening discussions on August 6. "The Americans have achieved nuclear weapons while we remain trapped in theoretical discussions about whether such achievement was possible. Our intellectual arrogance has blinded us to scientific capability that exceeded our comprehension. We dismissed their practical approach while they solved problems we couldn't even properly formulate." The detailed technical discussions among German physicists throughout the evening of August 6 revealed systematic recognition that American atomic achievement represented scientific superiority rather than engineering luck or resource resource advantage alone. Professor Heisenberg's analysis of reported weapon specifications showed American understanding of nuclear physics that surpassed German theoretical models in critical areas including critical mass calculations, neutron chain reaction control, and explosive lens design for plutonium implosion devices. They have solved nuclear weapons problems that we didn't realize existed, Heisenberg confessed to his colleagues, his words preserved through British surveillance. August 7 brought additional radio reports providing more comprehensive details about American atomic weapons development that completed the psychological demolition of German scientific confidence. The Manhattan Project scoped 130,000 personnel, multiple industrial facilities, unlimited government funding, revealed American scientific mobilization that operated beyond German comprehension of what atomic research required. Oak Ridge uranium enrichment, Hanford plutonium production, and Los Alamos weapons design represented integration of theoretical physics with industrial engineering that German academic tradition had considered impossible through practical methods. The most psychologically devastating revelation came through BBC reports describing the scientific leadership of the Manhattan Project, dominated by Jewish refugee physicists whom German scientists had dismissed as racially inferior and intellectually contaminated by non-Aryan thinking. Robert Oppenheimer, scientific director of Los Alamos, had coordinated nuclear weapons development, while German physicists considered such coordination beyond American theoretical capability. Enrico Fermi, whose controlled nuclear chain reaction had enabled weapons-grade plutonium production, represented practical achievement that German atomic research never attempted. Edward Teller's hydrogen fusion research exceeded German theoretical understanding entirely. Dr. Carl von Weizsäcker's comprehensive analysis of American atomic achievement, recorded during Farm Hall discussions on August 8, provided the most complete acknowledgement of German intellectual failure documented through British intelligence surveillance. The Americans have achieved nuclear weapons through scientific methodology that surpassed our theoretical approach, von Weizsäcker concluded. They integrated university research with industrial manufacturing, academic theory with practical application, individual brilliance with systematic collaboration. We remained trapped in academic isolation while they created scientific cooperation that solved nuclear weapons comprehensively. The August 9 radio announcement of the Nagasaki bombing eliminated final German hopes that Hiroshima represented isolated American achievement rather than systematic nuclear weapons capability. The second atomic bomb, using plutonium rather than uranium, demonstrated American mastery of multiple nuclear weapon designs, while German scientists still struggled to understand how any nuclear weapon could be practically achieved. The two different atomic weapons, uranium gun type and plutonium implosion devices, revealed American nuclear engineering sophistication that exceeded German theoretical comprehension entirely. Professor Otto Hahn's final assessment, recorded during August 9 evening discussions, provided the most emotionally devastating acknowledgement of personal responsibility for German scientific failure. I discovered nuclear fission in 1938, Hahn reflected, his voice breaking with emotion captured through British microphones. The Americans took my discovery and created weapons that will reshape human history while we debated theoretical possibilities. They achieved practical nuclear weapons while we remained paralyzed by academic arrogance. My scientific discovery has become proof of our intellectual inadequacy. The mathematical verification of American atomic success forced German physicists to confront the systematic nature of their scientific misjudgment about Allied capabilities. Heisenberg's uranium pile calculations, which had convinced German scientists that nuclear weapons required industrial resources beyond any nation's capability, were revealed as fundamentally flawed compared to American reactor designs that achieved sustained nuclear chain reactions enabling weapons-grade plutonium production. The theoretical foundations of German atomic research had been intellectually surpassed by practical American physics that integrated academic understanding with industrial implementation. August 10 brought President Truman's detailed radio address explaining atomic weapons development and threatening additional nuclear attacks against Japan, providing German physicists with comprehensive evidence of American nuclear arsenal that transcended isolated weapon achievement. Truman's description of continued atomic bomb production, multiple weapon designs, and unlimited nuclear materials revealed American atomic capability as systematic industrial achievement rather than experimental scientific breakthrough. The president's casual reference to atomic bomb assembly lines demonstrated American
nuclear weapons manufacturing that operated beyond German scientific imagination. The final psychological blow came through detailed BBC reporting of Japanese surrender negotiations explicitly citing atomic weapons as decisive factor ending Pacific War. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement, broadcast throughout Farm Hall on August 15, acknowledged a new and most cruel bomb that made continued resistance meaningless regardless of Japanese willingness to sacrifice. The atomic weapons had achieved strategic victory through scientific superiority rather than military conquest, proving that theoretical understanding combined with practical application could accomplish what conventional warfare never achieved. Dr. Werner Heisenberg's final recorded statement about American atomic achievement, captured during August 15 surrender announcement discussions, provided the most comprehensive acknowledgement of German scientific failure preserved through British intelligence surveillance. We who proclaim theoretical superiority have been surpassed by minds we dismissed as intellectually inferior, Heisenberg admitted. The Americans achieved nuclear weapons while we remained trapped in academic arrogance that prevented recognition of their scientific capability. Our contempt for their practical approach enabled them to solve nuclear problems we couldn't properly understand. We learned that scientific achievement requires intellectual humility that Nazi ideology made impossible. The transformation was complete and irreversible. German physicists who had laughed at American atomic research now confronted mathematical proof that democratic scientific collaboration had achieved nuclear weapons through theoretical understanding combined with practical capability that made German atomic research appear primitive by comparison. They had maintained intellectual arrogance while inferior minds mastered the fundamental forces of the universe, creating weapons that would reshape human history and render German scientific pretensions forever obsolete. The Farm Hall recordings preserve the exact moment when Nazi scientific superiority confronted evidence of its complete intellectual failure, captured for posterity through British microphones, that documented the psychological collapse of Germanic academic arrogance before superior American achievement that combined theoretical sophistication with democratic collaboration in ways that transcended traditional European academic models entirely.
The weeks following Hiroshima brought a systematic intellectual collapse among German physicists that was meticulously documented through the Farm Hall surveillance system. By August 20, 1945, the initial shock of American atomic success had evolved into comprehensive recognition that Nazi scientific ideology had prevented German achievement of nuclear weapons, despite possessing the theoretical knowledge necessary for such development. Werner Heisenberg's private conversations with Dr. Otto Hahn, recorded through hidden microphones, revealed the psychological process through which German scientists confronted their systematic misjudgment of American capabilities and their own ideological blindness. Professor Carl von Weizsäcker's detailed analysis of American atomic weapons, presented to his fellow prisoners on August 22, provided the most comprehensive acknowledgement of German scientific failure preserved through British intelligence recordings. The Americans achieved nuclear weapons not despite their practical approach, but because of it, von Weizsäcker concluded, after reviewing available technical details about the Manhattan Project. We dismissed their integration of theoretical physics with industrial engineering as intellectually primitive, while they created scientific methodology that solved nuclear problems we couldn't properly formulate. Our academic arrogance prevented recognition that collaborative research could surpass individual theoretical brilliance. The moral dimension of German scientific failure became unavoidable as additional information reached Farm Hall about the Jewish refugee scientists who had led American atomic weapons development. Albert Einstein's theoretical foundation for nuclear weapons, Enrico Fermi's controlled chain reaction achievement, Edward Teller's fusion calculations, and J. Robert Oppenheimer's scientific coordination had been accomplished by minds that Nazi racial ideology had dismissed as intellectually inferior. The irony was devastating. German persecution of Jewish scientists had provided America with intellectual leadership that created weapons beyond German theoretical comprehension. Max von Loy's August 25 reflection on the moral implications of German scientific failure revealed the psychological impact of recognizing that Nazi ideology had prevented scientific achievement while enabling intellectual superiority that never existed. We proclaimed Aryan physics superior to Jewish contamination, von Loysolek acknowledged in conversations recorded by British surveillance. The result was that Jewish refugees created nuclear weapons, while Aryan scientists remained trapped in theoretical discussions. Our racial ideology didn't just prevent moral behavior, it prevented scientific achievement by blinding us to intellectual capabilities that surpassed our own. The technical education that German physicists received through BBC reports and British intelligence briefings throughout September 1945 provided systematic evidence of American scientific superiority in every aspect of nuclear weapons development. Uranium enrichment techniques that German scientists had considered impossible through industrial methods had been achieved at Oak Ridge through gaseous diffusion processes that exceeded German theoretical calculations. Plutonium production at Hanford had created weapons-grade fissile material through reactor designs that surpassed German nuclear engineering entirely. The precision engineering required for plutonium implosion devices exceeded German metallurgy and explosive technology by generations of advancement. Professor Otto Hahn's personal reckoning with his role in enabling German scientific failure provided the most emotionally devastating testimony captured through farm hall recordings. As discoverer of nuclear fission, Hahn had provided the theoretical foundation that could have enabled German nuclear weapons, yet Nazi ideology and academic arrogance had prevented practical application of his discovery. "I gave Germany the scientific knowledge for nuclear weapons," Hahn confessed during September conversations with his fellow prisoners. "American scientists took my discovery and created weapons that ended a war while German scientists debated whether such weapons were theoretically possible. My scientific achievement became proof of our intellectual inadequacy." The systematic nature of German misjudgment became clear through detailed analysis of American atomic weapons program that revealed superior theoretical understanding combined with practical capability that German academic tradition had assumed was impossible. Los Alamos researchers had solved nuclear weapons design problems through mathematical precision that exceeded German theoretical models while simultaneously developing industrial manufacturing processes that enabled weapons production. This integration of sophisticated theory with practical application represented scientific methodology evolution beyond traditional European academic approaches that emphasized individual theoretical achievement over collaborative problem solving. October 1945 brought comprehensive British intelligence briefings that provided German physicists with detailed documentation of Manhattan Project organization, funding, and personnel that demonstrated American scientific mobilization operating beyond German comprehension of what atomic research required. The $2 billion budget exceeded German total wartime scientific expenditure by factors of magnitude. The 130,000 personnel represented scientific workforce that surpassed German university research capacity entirely. The integration of university research with corporate manufacturing, academic theory with industrial engineering, and theoretical physics with practical application had created scientific capabilities that German academic isolation could never achieve. The refugee scientist contribution became the most psychologically devastating aspect of German scientific failure as additional information revealed the intellectual caliber of Jewish physicists who had fled Nazi persecution and contributed to American atomic success. These were not mediocre minds seeking refuge, but brilliant theorists whose understanding exceeded their former German colleagues. Leo Szilard's chain reaction theories, Hans Bethe's nuclear fusion calculations, Emilio Segre's plutonium research, and Rudolf Peierl's critical mass determinations represented theoretical sophistication that surpassed German atomic research while simultaneously enabling practical weapons development. Dr. Karl von Weizsäcker's November assessment of democratic scientific methodology versus authoritarian academic hierarchy provided the most comprehensive analysis of systemic factors that enabled American atomic success while preventing German achievement. Democratic science encouraged intellectual challenge and collaborative innovation while Nazi hierarchy demanded conformity to ideological assumptions, von Weizsäcker concluded in conversations preserved through British surveillance. American researchers questioned theoretical limitations while German scientists accepted racial mythology that prevented recognition of intellectual capabilities exceeding our own. Scientific achievement requires intellectual freedom that totalitarian ideology makes impossible. The technical specifications of American atomic weapons gradually revealed through British intelligence sources throughout late 1945 demonstrated engineering precision and manufacturing capability that exceeded German industrial achievement in every significant category. The uranium gun-type weapon required isotope separation techniques that German atomic research had never attempted due to industrial complexity beyond German capability. The plutonium implosion device incorporated explosive lens technology, precision timing mechanisms, and metallurgical engineering that surpassed German weapons development entirely. Professor Werner Heisenberg's final comprehensive assessment recorded during December 1945 discussions provided the most complete acknowledgement of German scientific failure documented through farm hall surveillance. surveillance. We possessed theoretical knowledge sufficient for nuclear weapons yet achieved nothing, while Americans with supposedly inferior understanding created weapons that reshaped human history, Heisenberg admitted. Our intellectual arrogance prevented recognition that practical application requires collaborative methodology that individual theoretical brilliance cannot achieve. We remained trapped in academic isolation while they created scientific cooperation that solved nuclear problems comprehensively. The psychological transformation was irreversible and total. German physicists who had dismissed American atomic research as theoretical impossible now understood they had been intellectually surpassed by collaborative scientific methodology that integrated theoretical sophistication with practical capability in ways that transcended traditional European academic models. Nazi racial ideology had not just prevented moral behavior but had actively hindered scientific achievement by creating intellectual blindness to capabilities that exceeded German theoretical understanding. The farm hall recordings preserved the exact process through which Nazi scientific superiority confronted evidence of its complete intellectual failure, documenting the systematic collapse of Germanic academic arrogance before superior American achievement that proved democratic scientific collaboration could accomplish what authoritarian hierarchy never achieved. The greatest minds of German physics had learned they were intellectually inferior to the very refugees they had dismissed as racially contaminated, a recognition that would haunt German science for generations while proving that scientific achievement requires intellectual humility and collaborative spirit that totalitarian ideology makes impossible. The story of German atomic research during World War II stands as one of history's most profound examples of how ideological arrogance can blind intellectual excellence to superior achievement, preventing scientific progress while enabling the very capabilities it dismissed as impossible. The Nazi scientists who laughed at American atomic research discovered they had been surpassed not through resource advantage alone, but through collaborative methodology that integrated theoretical sophistication with practical application in ways that transcended traditional European academic models entirely. By spring 1946, as the German physicists prepared for repatriation from Farm Hall, the full scope of their scientific failure had become undeniably clear through comprehensive British intelligence briefings that revealed every aspect of American atomic weapons development. The Manhattan Project had achieved nuclear weapons through theoretical understanding that exceeded German calculations while simultaneously developing industrial capability that made German atomic research appear primitive by comparison. The mathematical precision, engineering excellence, and organizational coordination required for nuclear weapons had been accomplished by minds that German scientists had dismissed as intellectually inferior and racially contaminated. Admiral Karl Dunitz's post-war testimony, delivered during the Nuremberg trials, acknowledged the strategic implications of German scientific failure that extended beyond atomic weapons to fundamental misjudgment of Allied technological capabilities. Our scientists assured us that German theoretical superiority would naturally translate to practical advantage in advanced weapons development. Dunitz testified, "The atomic bomb proved that democratic scientific collaboration could achieve what authoritarian academic hierarchy never accomplished. We lost the war not just through military defeat, but through intellectual failure that prevented recognition of enemy capabilities exceeding our comprehension." The refugee scientist contribution represented the most devastating refutation of Nazi racial ideology that had claimed intellectual superiority while driving away the very minds that would create weapons transcending German theoretical understanding. Albert Einstein's mass energy equation provided theoretical foundation for nuclear weapons while German scientists dismissed relativity as Jewish physics. Enrico Fermi's controlled nuclear chain reaction enabled weapons-grade plutonium production while German physicists remained trapped in theoretical discussions about chain reaction feasibility. Edward Teller's fusion calculations exceeded German nuclear understanding while representing minds that Nazi persecution had given to American scientific leadership. Dr. Werner Heisenberg's 1947 memoir, published after his return to Germany, provided the most comprehensive acknowledgement of personal responsibility for German scientific failure that had prevented atomic weapons development despite possessing necessary theoretical knowledge. "We remained trapped in academic arrogance that assumed theoretical sophistication automatically translated to practical superiority," Heisenberg wrote. "The Americans achieved nuclear weapons through collaborative methodology that integrated university research with industrial engineering, academic theory with corporate manufacturing, individual brilliance with systematic cooperation. We dismissed their approach as intellectually primitive while they solved nuclear problems we couldn't properly formulate. The institutional analysis conducted by Allied scientific intelligence revealed systematic factors that enabled American atomic success while preventing German achievement despite comparable individual intellectual capability. Democratic scientific culture encouraged intellectual challenge and methodological innovation, while Nazi hierarchy demanded conformity to ideological assumptions that prevented recognition of alternative approaches to nuclear weapons development. American researchers questioned theoretical limitations while German scientists accepted racial mythology that blinded them to intellectual capabilities exceeding their own understanding. The technical documentation declassified during the 1950s revealed the comprehensive nature of American scientific superiority in every aspect of nuclear weapons development that German physicists had considered impossible through industrial methods. Uranium enrichment at Oak Ridge had achieved isotope separation through gaseous diffusion processes that exceeded German theoretical calculations. Plutonium production at Hanford had created weapons-grade fissile material through reactor designs that surpassed German nuclear engineering entirely. Los Alamos weapons assembly had integrated precision manufacturing with theoretical physics in ways that transcended traditional academic boundaries between pure and applied science. The economic analysis of atomic weapons development revealed resource mobilization that demonstrated American industrial capacity operating beyond German comprehension of what nuclear research required. The Manhattan Project's $2 billion budget exceeded German total wartime scientific expenditure while representing fraction of American industrial output dedicated to weapons development. The 130,000 personnel employed in atomic research surpassed German university capacity while demonstrating scientific workforce mobilization that treated nuclear weapons as systematic engineering challenge rather than isolated academic investigation. But the most psychologically devastating aspect of German scientific failure was the recognition that Nazi ideology had actively prevented intellectual achievement rather than simply failing to enable it. The persecution of Jewish scientists had eliminated precisely the theoretical brilliance that could have enabled German nuclear weapons while providing American research with intellectual leadership that exceeded German academic capability. Racial mythology had not just created moral blindness but had produced strategic stupidity that ensured German defeat through systematic elimination of scientific talent necessary for nuclear weapons development. Professor Max von Lau's 1948 assessment of German scientific culture provided the most comprehensive critique of institutional factors that prevented atomic weapons achievement despite individual theoretical excellence. Nazi ideology created intellectual environment that discouraged questioning of assumptions, prevented recognition of alternative methodologies, and eliminated collaborative approaches necessary for complex technological development. Von Laus concluded, "Scientific achievement requires intellectual humility and cooperative spirit that totalitarian systems make impossible. We possessed individual brilliance but lacked collaborative capability that democratic science enabled." The international scientific community's response to German atomic research failure established lasting recognition that scientific achievement transcends individual theoretical sophistication to require institutional support for intellectual freedom, methodological innovation, and collaborative problem solving. The Federation of American Scientists, founded by Manhattan Project veterans, explicitly cited German scientific failure as evidence that democratic values were essential for technological progress that served human welfare rather than ideological domination. The Cold War atomic weapons development that followed demonstrated continued American scientific leadership rooted in collaborative methodology that had enabled nuclear weapons, while German reconstruction struggled to rebuild scientific institutions capable of international cooperation. The hydrogen bomb, achieved through theoretical calculations that exceeded German nuclear understanding, proved that American atomic success represented systematic scientific superiority rather than isolated wartime achievement. Former German physicists who emigrated to America contributed to continued nuclear weapons development while acknowledging their previous intellectual inadequacy. Carl von Weizsäcker's 1957 reflection on German scientific failure provided the most mature assessment of personal and institutional factors that prevented atomic weapons development despite theoretical knowledge sufficient for nuclear weapons creation. "We failed not through lack of individual intelligence but through cultural arrogance,"
arrogance that prevented recognition of intellectual approaches superior to our own. Von Weizsäcker wrote, "Democratic science enabled collaboration that transcended individual limitations, while authoritarian culture created isolation that prevented practical application of theoretical knowledge. Scientific achievement requires intellectual community that Nazi ideology destroyed." The final historical judgment remained inescapable. German scientists who proclaimed theoretical superiority had been intellectually surpassed by collaborative methodology that integrated sophisticated understanding with practical capability in ways that transcended traditional academic boundaries. Nazi racial ideology had not just prevented moral behavior but had actively hindered scientific achievement by creating intellectual blindness to capabilities that exceeded German theoretical comprehension. The atomic bomb represented not just military defeat but intellectual proof that democratic scientific collaboration could accomplish what Germanic superiority never achieved: the transformation of theoretical knowledge into practical capability that reshaped human history. The German physicists who laughed at American atomic research learned they had mocked the minds that would master the fundamental forces of the universe, while they remained trapped in academic arrogance that prevented recognition of their own intellectual inadequacy. Their story remains relevant for contemporary scientific development. The most sophisticated theoretical knowledge becomes meaningless without institutional support for intellectual humility, collaborative methodology, and democratic values that enable practical application of advanced understanding. The Nazi scientists achieved individual theoretical excellence while failing completely to create nuclear weapons that democratic collaboration accomplished through superior scientific culture rather than superior individual intelligence alone. The final chapter of German atomic research failure was written not in the laboratories of the Third Reich, but in the post-war testimonials of scientists who had learned that intellectual arrogance could blind brilliant minds to superior achievement happening under their dismissive gaze. By 1950, as the Cold War atomic arms race accelerated beyond anything imagined during World War II, former Nazi physicists found themselves witnessing American nuclear capabilities that transcended their wartime atomic weapons to include hydrogen bombs, nuclear submarines, and intercontinental ballistic missiles, all developed by the same inferior scientific establishment they had mocked during their farm hall captivity. Werner Heisenberg's 1955 address to the Max Planck Institute captured the enduring lesson of German scientific failure that extended beyond atomic weapons to fundamental questions about intellectual humility and collaborative research methodology. "We learned that theoretical sophistication means nothing without the institutional framework to enable practical application," Heisenberg reflected before an audience of post-war German scientists. The Americans achieved nuclear weapons not despite their practical approach, but because of their integration of theoretical understanding with democratic scientific cooperation. "We remained trapped in academic isolation while they created collaborative methodology that solved problems we couldn't properly formulate." The brain drain from post-war Germany to American research institutions provided continuing evidence of scientific superiority that former Nazi physicists had failed to recognize during the war. Hans Bethe, refugee physicist who had led Los Alamos theoretical division, continued developing nuclear weapons theory that exceeded German understanding while simultaneously advancing peaceful atomic energy applications. Edward Teller's hydrogen bomb calculations represented theoretical sophistication that surpassed wartime German physics while proving that refugee scientists possessed intellectual capabilities exceeding their former colleagues who had dismissed them as racially inferior. The establishment of NATO scientific cooperation and the European Atomic Energy Community demonstrated institutional recognition that democratic collaboration could achieve technological capabilities that individual national programs could never accomplish alone. Former German physicists participated in these international research programs while acknowledging that American scientific leadership resulted from methodological superiority rather than resource advantage alone. The collaborative approaches that had enabled wartime atomic weapons continued producing peacetime nuclear technology that benefited global civilization rather than serving ideological domination. Professor Max von Lober's final assessment, delivered during his 1960 retirement ceremony, provided the most mature reflection on German scientific failure that had prevented atomic weapons while enabling superior American achievement through intellectual approaches that transcended traditional European academic models. Scientific progress requires institutional support for intellectual freedom, methodological innovation, and
and collaborative problem-solving that totalitarian ideology makes impossible, von Lobers concluded. We possessed individual theoretical excellence while lacking the democratic scientific culture that enables practical application of advanced understanding for human benefit rather than ideological conquest. The nuclear proliferation that followed World War II demonstrated that atomic weapons knowledge had become accessible to nations with far less scientific capability than wartime Germany, proving that German failure resulted from institutional and ideological constraints rather than inadequate theoretical understanding. The Soviet Union, United Kingdom, France, and eventually smaller nations achieved nuclear weapons through systematic application of principles that German scientists had dismissed as impossible through industrial methods during their farm hall discussions. The space race of the 1960s provided final confirmation that American scientific superiority extended beyond nuclear weapons to encompass systematic technological achievement that operated through collaborative methodology rather than individual theoretical brilliance alone. Former German rocket scientists, including Werner von Braun, who had fled to America after the war, contributed to lunar landing programs while acknowledging that American success resulted from institutional support for scientific cooperation that Nazi ideology had prevented during wartime research programs. Carl von Weizsäcker's 1970 memoir provided the most comprehensive historical assessment of German scientific failure that addressed both immediate atomic weapons consequences and long-term implications for understanding relationships between political systems and technological achievement. Nazi racial ideology created intellectual environment that discouraged questioning of assumptions, prevented recognition of alternative methodologies, and eliminated collaborative approaches necessary for complex technological development. Von Weizsäcker wrote, "Democratic science enables intellectual humility and cooperative innovation that authoritarian systems make impossible regardless of individual theoretical sophistication." The environmental and peace movements of the 1970s included prominent participation by former Manhattan Project scientists who had created atomic weapons while maintaining commitment to democratic values that prevented nuclear technology from serving ideological domination. These scientists, dismissed by German physicists as intellectually inferior during farm hall conversations, continued demonstrating moral and intellectual leadership that integrated scientific achievement with social responsibility in ways that transcended narrow technical expertise to serve broader human welfare. The final historical judgment remained inescapable and enduring. German scientists who had proclaimed theoretical superiority based on racial ideology had been intellectually and morally surpassed by collaborative methodology that integrated sophisticated understanding with democratic values, enabling practical application for human benefit rather than ideological conquest. Nazi persecution of Jewish scientists had eliminated precisely the intellectual capabilities necessary for atomic weapons while providing those same capabilities to enemies who created weapons that ended the war and established lasting peace through strength rather than domination. The story of Nazi scientific failure continues to resonate in contemporary discussions about relationships between political freedom and technological innovation, demonstrating that the most advanced theoretical knowledge becomes meaningless without institutional support for intellectual humility, collaborative methodology, and democratic values that enable practical application of scientific understanding. The German physicists who laughed at American atomic research learned that scientific achievement requires more than individual brilliance. It demands the democratic culture that nurtures cooperative innovation capable of transforming theoretical knowledge into practical capabilities that serve human civilization rather than ideological supremacy. Their legacy serves as permanent reminder that intellectual arrogance combined with authoritarian ideology can blind even brilliant minds to superior achievement happening beyond their comprehension, while democratic scientific collaboration continues enabling technological progress that benefits global civilization through cooperative application of advanced understanding guided by moral principles that transcend narrow national or ideological interests.